Cool. Welcome everyone to the April 11th Dev Call. We're going to get started. We have quite a few actually, protocol level things that we wanted to discuss, and also some updates from the Warpcast side of things. So let me get started. The big topic for discussion is we put out a proposal yesterday for how we're thinking about scaling Farcaster. So the broader problem, we're up to about 80,000 daily active users as measured on Warpcast, and it's roughly the same as measured from people interacting with the protocol. And we want to start thinking about, okay, what is going to take us to 1 million users every day? And what structural pieces do we need to put in place so that different clients, different apps, all writing to the ecosystem are going to get a good experience? And at a very, very high level, I think the way we're thinking about the requirements are as follows. The four most important things we want to achieve are like, one, hubs need to be reasonably expensive to operate. They're almost certainly going to be more expensive than they are today because disk space is going to increase. But we want it to be possible to run a hub for less than $1,000 a month on commodity hardware at 1 million users per day. Second goal is message delivery. We want to make sure that messages arrive in under 10 seconds, 90% of the time. So if you are a hub on the network, you publish a message, it shows up on Warpcast, Nanar, Airstack at their hubs within within 10 seconds, 90% of the time. Third goal is we want to make sure that hubs stay in sync. And we have some metrics for how we measure this, which is roughly like how caught up are you with the latest state of the network. But again, we want to make sure that 99% of well-functioning hubs are in sync with the network. And the last goal, the fourth one, is we've also been investing a lot in replication. And we know that for most apps, it's not just valuable to get data to your hubs. You actually want to proxy this into a database. And the last sort of goal that we're applying is like, okay, we want to make sure that we have an out-of-the-box experience where you can install something that will get 99.9% of the data into a database in under a second. So whatever you have on your hub is flowing into your database very quickly and vice versa, so that you're actually able to do all of the changes and operations that you want. So that's what we've set out as our goal. The rest of the plan talks through how we're going to achieve that and some of the ordering of problems that we're going to go tackle. But I want to pause there and see if anyone has any questions or comments on this before I keep rolling. Okay, cool. First problem, and this is something that if you're running a hub today, you're probably noticing some of this, is sync is actually one of our biggest bottlenecks today. We've noticed that there's a small set of hubs that are falling out of sync. We're not sure why. It might be low hardware, it might be they're getting disconnected from their nodes, but that's one set of things that we're investigating. And then the second problem is gossip consumes a fairly large amount of bandwidth today for reasons we don't fully understand. And so we're actually shipping a set of changes called bundles today that's going to significantly reduce the amount of bandwidth that gossip takes, which will make hubs easier to operate and less likely to drop messages. And the third problem is we're actually working on differential sync, improving differential sync. So one of the problems we have is if your hub shuts down or goes offline for a few minutes, it'll catch up fine. But if you go offline for a few hours and then restart, you kind of have to wipe your hub and set everything up again and download from Snapshot, or you'll never catch up because the catch-up sync is not as fast as it needs to be. And so those are the three pieces that the team is laser focused on right now, which is improving the performance of gossip sync, finding and fixing all of the various sync problems, and then starting to think about how to improve diff sync and make it faster. And the spec goes into like a bunch more details about how we're going to do this and all of this stuff. I won't get into all that in this call, but if anyone has any questions, happy to chat through them on this call or later in the thing. The second problem that we're working on, and Sanjay has been leading a lot of the work here, is on replication. And we've been working with some of the biggest hub runners, Airstack, Nanar, Pinata, to figure out like what people want and deliver something that's valuable. And so we have a new system called Shuttle that's shipping soon. We already have like an alpha out. And the goal behind Shuttle is you can download this package, you can install it in your system. It's a Node.js package. You connect it to a Postgres database, and it guarantees that there is one table with every single message that was produced in the hub that's going to be written there. And you can then copy those messages into whatever schema, whatever structure, whatever system that you like. And this guarantees that if the hub goes offline or your server goes offline, it'll be able to do a catch up. It guarantees that as data is coming in, it'll stream it very, very quickly. And so it's less opinionated than the old replicator. because it puts everything into a single table, but it's going to be much more powerful and much easier to operate and gives people integrating it a lot of flexibility because you can take these tables and copy them out into whatever whatever layout or structure is best for your application and your queries. Cool. So the replication part of the problem is we don't have this thing working yet. We just got to go build it. And once we build it, we'll get more numbers on how it's working and continue improving it. But that's what we're focused on today from replication. And then finally, the last problem we'll work on after these two are settled is state growth. So we're growing at about the amount of space that all users' messages take up on disk is growing at about 1.7 gigs a day right now. And if you project this outwards to 1 million users, that's going to be growing at the rate of 20 gigs per day. I think we have a set of things that we can do to improve this. So first is actually getting hubs able to run on lower cost hardware and disks. So right now, if you have a high performance hub, you probably need to run it on an NVMe disk, which is very, very low latency and high throughput. But we want to make it work on general purpose SSDs. Beyond that, we have a few other knobs and dials we can push in terms of compression, in terms of changing storage limits, in terms of tweaking things that'll make this a lot more efficient. But today, the size of a hub is about 50 gigs. You should probably provision 100 gigs to run well. And I think at 1 million users, this will probably be in the like tens of terabytes range. And there's a bunch of things that we can do to bring that down here and there. But generally, storage requirements will grow somewhat linearly with the number of users we have on the network. But we're fairly confident that we can get to 1 million users with a very simple setup where you can get $1,000 a month cloud commodity hardware thing, run a hub, and have it work. Cool. I'll pause there. We have a bunch of sub projects that we're running, but we wanted to give some overview into how we're sequencing these things. And if hub operators have any feedback, we'd love to hear that. If we should change the order of things, or if some problems are more pressing than others. Question in the chat: will Shuttle Hub have the ability to replay data when hubs go down? Yes. So there's going to be a reconciliation or catch-up process where if you have gone offline and you come back online, there will be a process by which they compare all of the data and catch up periodically. It's going to be a little slower than the regular sync and will take some time, especially as the network grows, but that's going to be built into the hub so that you can handle that. And we also have Sanjay here, who is leading a lot of this stuff, so I'll let him also take some of these questions. Sanjay, do you want to take this question on if someone wants to start replicating today? Should they use Replicator or wait for Shuttle?
Yeah, you should actually use Shuttle. The alpha version is already out, and I expect the almost fully fledged version to be out like later this week. And yeah, you should use Shuttle. Let me know if you have any feedback around the APIs or anything like that. It's still subject to change. But yeah.
Cool. Sanjay, I think we have a few more questions for you in chat. I'll just read them out so everyone can hear them. Will Shuttle handle data expiration when someone's rent ends?
Yes, it will. It's going to mark the messages as deleted. No messages are actually going to be deleted from the DB. We use soft deletes. So when it does expire, the hubs are going to delete the messages, but the Shuttle will pick that up and update the rows in the DB to be deleted.
Will Shuttle have the ability to handle replaying custom hooks, or will operators be responsible for that?
I'm not sure what that means. So I'm assuming this means something like if custom hooks fails, will the Shuttle be responsible for replaying it? The short answer is the Shuttle expects all hooks to succeed. Otherwise, the transaction that inserts the message into the DB will fail. And so if that fails, the Shuttle's reconciliation will pick it up at some point. So there is like an implicit retry, but like there's no happy to chat more about like if that doesn't suit your needs.
Cool. And anyone asking questions, you should feel free to jump up and chat if you want to provide more context. But we'll keep going down the list. Is there a notion of how many hubs will be ideal for 1 million DAO states? So The number of hubs is that we need for decentralization is actually fairly low. And the reason for that is a lot of the actual core security is guaranteed by Ethereum. So accounts, usernames, signers, all of this stuff is actually stored on the Optimism blockchain. So unlike Ethereum, where you need a certain number of nodes to maintain sovereignty of the system, the purpose of hubs is just to offer easy access to data and to duplicate it enough times that if any one server goes down, the whole network doesn't disappear, right? Like if Warpcast was to like get hit by, like if our AWS servers were to get hit by a meteor today, are we going to have other copies of the network lying around? And so the answer for us, we thought about this earlier, was like, okay, if we have at least 10 fully functional hubs running in a few different countries, we're probably safe from most like outlier attacks. And if we're at 100, we're in a great place. I think we're already at 1,000+ hubs consistently running for the last month. So I think from a replication of data across multiple geos and multiple continents, we're doing pretty well right now, and we'd be very happy if we just stayed here. If anything, and this is kind of funny, the more hubs we have, the harder it gets to actually keep the network decentralized because there's just more and more traffic going through. And so in some senses, it would be better if we just stayed at around 1,000, even as we approach 1 million down. But we are planning for that number to actually go up, and we assume more people will want to run hubs, and the network does need to scale beyond that. Cool. Is the network hub design beyond 1 million DAO still TBD? I think for 1 million DAO, we have a very concrete plan with benchmarks, numbers clear, like this is how the things will work. For how we get to 10 million and 100 million, we have some rough ideas that involve sharding, that involve separation of disks, that involve lowering limits, which is more at like the conceptual stage. But I think there's a doc I wrote earlier. I can reshare this, but I think generally speaking, like rough back of the envelope math is we can probably get to somewhere between 10 million and 100 million on largely our current architecture with some modifications to state and storage and a few other things. And getting to 1 billion, however, will probably require some serious redesigning of the system. But I think we have a little bit of headroom until we get there. Cool. When will we have the ability to replay messages in the hub? Ideally, we pick an epoch time and replay from the point of. John, you want to elaborate on what you mean by replay messages?
Yeah, hi. So when a hub goes down, let's say it went down for like 2 hours and then the hub comes back up, let's say like in the replicator or whatnot, like there I'm assuming shuttle is gonna connect to the hub via gRPC or something. Is there something where you can like pick like almost like a cursor and say, or a deltas, where you just pick a point in time and then just replay those messages? Because otherwise you gotta like just backfill and loop through every single message.
Yeah, there's basically two kinds of failures that we need to handle for. One is I just got disconnected from my hub and I came back online. I just need to catch up with the last couple of minutes. And the other is a little more severe. It's my hub went away, like your AWS machine crashed, you lost disk or whatever, and you're connecting to a completely new hub, or you were offline for like a week. Sanjay, do you want to jump in and maybe answer how you're thinking about those two cases with shuttle?
Yeah, so actually, in this particular case where the hub goes down, it's more of a hub problem in that like the hub itself will be missing messages, and when it comes back up, it needs to sync with the network to figure out like what messages the hub missed within those within that like 1 hour period when it was down. And whenever the hub picks it up, Replicator will automatically pick it up from the event stream. The the problem though is like that particular case of like hub going down for like an hour is not well optimized with the current sync mechanism the hub has. DivSync will try to sync like the whole message try. The and that can take some time. We have some plans to optimize that, so we will do something very similar to what you're saying, where it's like we know what the last message was. We will try to stream all the events from like a separate hub that was up during that time. But there are like some implementation details I have to make sure like we get it right. You have to stream it from the right hub that has capacity, and we have to know that like that hub didn't miss any other messages. So I would say like with regard to the replicator, you don't have to worry too much about what messages were missed. When the hub gets it, a replicator will or shuttle will get it. But right now we have some work to do to make that the time difference between like when hub picks up all the missing messages much faster. I would say if it happened to miss more than like a 3 million or so messages, we will fetch from snapshot, and that will be much faster than catching up via sync.
Yeah, sorry, just to elaborate on that. Exactly. If it pulls it up from snapshot, then we would be missing messages, right? And then you'd have to replay from a cursor. So that's the thing that we're worried about. And also, we want more control over real-time data that's coming in through Gossip versus like the hub goes down for a bit. The sync backfills everything. You don't want stuff from like 3 hours ago just flowing in through your event stream, right? So those are the like if there is like a hub endpoint like a gRPC that we have more control over that and just say, oh, we can just replay it here safely. That's what we're more concerned about and worried about. Thank you.
I'm not
Like I'll try to take this one really quickly. So basically, like the way to think about hubs are one is they have consistent event streams. Each hub is like consistent within itself. And I think Greg asked a separate question that's kind of related here is like, do we depend on one hub for backup or not? So the way to think about it is each hub has a sequence of events that it has seen and observed from the rest of the world based on how it's seen. If you are connecting to a hub, you're always able to connect and stream changes according to the order in this hub is seen. So you check in at 11 a.m., you go offline for 20 minutes, you come back, you can say, hey, I'd like to pick up at this exact last message that I've seen and stream everything cleanly from then on out. So as long as the hub is getting messages and the hub is online, you will always be able to stream messages. Two additional pieces of context. One is Greg asked about will we be able to support multiple hubs? So in the initial version of Shuttle, no, but that's actually something that we want at Warpcast for ourselves, and we're going to build into future versions of Shuttle, where you can actually take two event streams, which may have different sets of events, and actually reconcile them into the same Postgres database. So it gives you sort of high availability, and it handles all of the fuzziness of this event streams may have A, B, C, D, E, this may have D, C, B, A, E. And we will figure out how to merge all of those together and put it in. There's a more subtle thing about like what happens when the hub itself goes online and how does the hub handle its event stream. And so our general philosophy is if you as a hub go offline for like an hour and you come back online, there are two separate sync processes that are going to catch you up. And they're going to catch you up in different ways. Process one is Gossip, where it's going to say, okay, get me all the stuff happening from this moment forward. And process two is sort of your catch-up sync, which is going to say, okay, I know I was offline. I don't know what I missed. Let me go and stream all of that stuff in. But this is going to happen simultaneously. And so you're going to get these messages in some new order because there's no global ordering at the Farcaster network. That's actually what lets us have insanely low transaction fees and reach very, very high throughputs is the fact that we don't have to deal with any of that. And so that's how that ordering works at the hub level and why each hub might have a slightly different order or sequence in which it sees the events play out in the network. Greg and John, did that answer your guys' questions? Cool. Can Shuttle use the same snapshot? We've been the direct answer is no, but the higher level answer is we have been thinking about ways to use snapshots to bootstrap the initial sync faster. Sanjay can maybe comment on whether that's going to get in the initial version or that's something we're thinking about in the future.
Yeah, probably not in the initial version. But yeah, it's something we want to do in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, in the run walk crawl mentality, or the crawl walk run mentality, the crawl for a shuttle is going to be this works and this can sync stuff slowly and it can catch up and the thing works. And then eventually we'll get to like, okay, if you just start syncing from scratch, how do we make sure that in like 10 or 15 minutes you actually have a Postgres database ready to go? But it will have to use different snapshots because obviously it is much easier to have like a Postgres compatible snapshot versus having to like stream everything out from the hub over gRPC and load it to the database. Last question, how long does it take to replicate the shuttle from scratch? Maybe Sanjay has some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so the short answer is I don't know yet because I'm still working on the job system to do the backfill in parallel. We should know probably end of the week. But theoretically, it should only be bound by your hub's capacity and Postgres insert throughput because it can do the way the backfill will work is like it's gonna enqueue a bunch of jobs per FID, and you can scale up the number of workers you have. So like multiple FIDs can be backfilled in parallel. But I don't have like an actual number on like this is how long it takes to sync from scratch. But I will get that. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, if there's no more questions, either in chat or here, we're gonna roll on to some of the next agenda items. But just as a recap, Shuttle is ready. I think it'll be very ready by the end of this week. If you're starting to think about replicators now, you should probably use Shuttle and not the old replicator, which is unsupported. So reach out to me or Sanjay if you have any questions on that. Two, Aditya's changes to bundles are rolling out soon. Again, this week, new version of the hub will go out. And this should significantly reduce the network usage that you're seeing in your hub. So right now, hubs may be using, a few hundreds of kilobytes, like 500 to 800 kilobytes per second. That should go down quite significantly, and sync should speed up a little bit. And then Wasif is also working on some other changes which should help with sync as well. So we expect all those three to go out in minor versions. And if you're running hubs and want better performance, we actually encourage upgrading these minor versions. The auto upgrade will not necessarily upgrade all these minor versions for you, so you may have to do them manually, but we'll try to announce them as they roll out. Cool. Moving along to the list, we've already talked about scaling Farcaster and Shuttle. Last up is we launched Cast Actions last week. When we talked about this 2 weeks ago, we surfaced the proposal. Cast Actions are now out and live, and Tony and Horsefax are working on some new changes, but maybe we'll just open it up for questions if anyone has like initial thoughts or feedback about the Cast Actions for either Horsefax or Tony. Okay, we got our first one. Possible to redirect from a cast action, yes or no?
Yeah, no today, but it's something we're thinking about. I think the two options there are maybe letting you specify a URL in your action response, or doing it similarly to the way we do with frame redirects. So chewing on both of those. If people have an opinion on which direction we should go there, let me know.
Cool. What are we thinking about cast action leading into a frame, and why the constraints on character limits? Daniel, is that character limits in the response or something else?
I would say it's both. Both the title itself apparently has 20 character limit, and then also the the message reply is 30 character limit.
Yeah, so on number one, like our immediate work probably today and tomorrow is going to be on action discoverability, which we heard both from devs and users. They just want better discoverability. So we're going to try to build out a scrappy discover actions page that will have a little bit of better kind of onboarding new user experience and let people find actions a little more easily. I think the immediate next large consideration after that is replying with a frame. So we're thinking about what the context for that should look like. It's context that's kind of outside of a specific cast. So thinking a little bit about what the design for that should look like. But that's coming soon, and I think that allows for a bunch of use cases. So if you have a specific use case you're thinking about there, or like considerations on what that design should look like, would be interested to hear it. Number two, character limits. Mostly it's a design consideration. We only have so much room in those toasts on mobile and on web. We did just yesterday update the web toasts. There's a little more room in those now, and we do think we can probably split across 2 lines in there. So I think in the next, today or tomorrow, one thing we're looking at is whether we can extend those a little bit further. So TBD on what we think the actual value is there, but I think we will be able to maybe squeeze in a little bit more room on some of those character limits. As far as like on action descriptions and elsewhere, we can think about extending those too. And I think we're going to add some additional metadata for action installation, like a short description, a longer description, some more stuff in there that will make it a little bit more like kind of a Chrome extension description type of thing for install.
Cool. Yeah, and then Horsefax, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the way you and Tony were thinking about cast action to frame was having ephemeral frames. So the idea that when you trigger a cast action, you sort of get this temporary frame that you can interact with that lets you complete the action and collect a bunch of parameters. So that way we're not intruding into the cast space and actually just like, posting replies and creating notifications. Jason, I know you asked for like reply frames. Would this ephemeral frame structure kind of solve what you're looking for?
Not exactly. We kind of imagine it as like being able to essentially summon a frame that everyone who's interacting with that cast could interact with.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I still think there are use cases for that, right? And in that case, you can I think you could use a bot, right, that replies with a frame to that cast.
Cool. There's a comment on delete actions. It's on the roadmap. I think we're gonna have like the ability to replace actions soon and then delete. So team's priority right now, just to sequence. Number one is discoverability of actions. So we want to make it easier for users to find your actions, and so like showing the most popular actions, letting you add more, et cetera, et cetera. That like simple model at the Warpcast level is something we're going to introduce. I'm sure other clients are also thinking about ways to do this. And then beyond that is extending the spec with like delete at the Warpcast level, open up frames, which will be like a protocol level spec, and we'll need buy-in from other clients, which will extend what we can do with frames. Would be cool to have a way for configurable actions. Well, what did you mean by configurable actions?
Hey guys, it's Siniver. So just imagine you have you want to add a payment cost section, right? And then different users want to have a different amount, different chain, different token. So like it's a bit complicated to have like all the variations for the installation links. So it would be cool just to have some way to define the configs, and then the user can on installation tab choose whatever he wants.
So one way you might be able to do this with the thing that Horsefax is proposing is when you trigger the action, you can pop up a frame and then collect whatever parameters or information you want from the user at that point. So you could just have a pay action that's like pay, and then you pop up something saying, well, how much would you like to pay on what chain? And then that would solve it. Would that solve your use case, or is there a specific need to actually have the button configured before it's installed?
I see. Like, would that be framed at the step of installation, or when you actually trigger the?
We're thinking the latter right now.
I see. I see. I mean, the latter might work for some cases, but if there was a first option, I would prefer that as well. That would be cool. Actually.
We can follow up offline and maybe try to understand that more. Sorry, Horsefax, you're saying
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say I think there are some patterns to think about here, and we've seen some emergent patterns that we might want to capture into how the design works, right? Like I've seen people build frames that configure the action, and then at the end of that frame, you install the action. Those are pretty cool, and I think capturing that into the spec when we can is useful. But maybe we'll take a little more time to give people some of the building blocks and then see how they use that. One thing we should signal, to folks who are building frames is where we are intending to probably move away from the deep link format and towards loading this metadata from a URL at some point, and at some point probably meaning in the next week or two. We'll try to maintain backwards compatibility for those deep links since people are already building those and using those. But that makes it a little bit more like the frame model where we load that metadata from some URL. It is like much more cross-client compatible. It'll be easier for folks to integrate there, and we think that has some benefits. So we kind of like cut some corners to ship with the deep link quick and get this out. And we're a little scrappy there, but we think in the longer term, it probably makes sense to do that. So if you're building actions, just be aware that that's probably a potential change to the spec that's coming.
Cool. Jason had a
cool.
question
Thanks.
on this ephemeral action, always be able to link back to the parent cast. So the version of ephemeral that we're kicking around and we're thinking about is something meant to handle the very simple case of like you click the tip button, you then want to specify how much. So you get this like temporary thing that pops up that is like customized to you and stateless. You just type in the amount, you hit enter, and then it actually goes and does the action for you. I think if you're trying to have something that is stateful and that shows up the same way across like a bunch of different users, there's probably a way to get to that with a slightly different setup or like a bot or something like that. But we can chat about that offline and make sure we find a way to unlock.
Yeah, I was getting my head around that. The different question was more like, let's just say if this tip button could, on the back end, could we always relay back that the tip was for this cast rather than this user?
I think you should be able to, because you would have the context of the cast action, but Horsefax Attorney can correct me if I'm wrong there. Okay, we might actually be able to get what you want with this ephemeral frame, but
Yeah,
if you
I think we'll get there.
we can make that work.
Yep.
Cool. Sweet. I think that covers. Oh wait, there's a couple more. FID ownership of an action, so users can establish accountability. To make sure I'm understanding that right, this is basically like, can we know who created an action, so we know like, hey, this was created by Dan Romero or Sanjay or something like that. Is that right? Okay, assuming that's right, I think it's something the team is cooking. I don't know, it's not on the short-term roadmap, but I think it's something that we want to do.
Yeah, it is. We were just discussing this when we were talking about the actions and frames roadmap earlier. We think, we've had several proposals for this. There are like some intersecting concerns around, these verifications need to be revocable, right? And some kind of edge casey things that we need to think about. Tony and I were discussing this, and we think probably a simple, like, kind of MVP on this is probably likely to use Warpcast as a semi-centralized registry there. So you can sign the information, but if you need to revoke your association, you would do that through Warpcast, and that will let us bootstrap this, get us 90% of the value of this feature, and we can think about how you do that association, like using ENS or on-chain, or with some more complex but more decentralized method once that's out in the future. But there are tons of benefits, we think, to having that association, both for frames and for actions. And so we're probably going to go back to the drawing board a bit and think about how we can use Warpcast to bootstrap that.
There's another question on chain support. Horseback actually just surfaced this morning. We think there's a bunch of additional chains that we can go support. Solana, Degen, Arbitrum, Optimism, bunch included. There's probably some work that we need to do from an infra perspective to unlock each of these chains. And so we're thinking about the best way to sequence it. But TLDR, we want to do this stuff, and we plan to get to it at some point in the future once we get all the building blocks in place. Cool. Any more questions for the Frames team before we move on to Warpcast updates? All right. Rolling over to Warpcast. So teams focused on a few things this week. First one and most important one is app performance and quality. So there are two sub pieces here. One is Goksu, who's on the call today, is actually leading a push to rewrite DirectCast to work at scale. I think the system that we had in place worked well until we got to where we are, but now we kind of need to rethink the way that we handle state on the front end and state on the back end and at the data layer and make this all work. And so there's a little bit of surgery involved here to upgrade the plane as it's flying. So we're about to try to land all that in the next few weeks. And our goal is to actually get DirectCast to a level of reliability that's on par with the other apps that you use. And we're very aware that it's not quite there today. There have been a lot of like scaling pains and slight UI bugs. And so it's very important for us that we fix this, and we're making this like the top priority for the team to go and tackle. Second priority is fixing crashes, performance issues, and general improvement. There's just a long tail of like on certain Android devices, we notice the number of crashes go up, particularly running out of memory. We also notice some performance issues happen across all devices, battery usage, network consumption, and
क्या उसमें फायदा करता है तो 5 मिनट और कर लेगा
Jeff, who's on the call today, is driving.
हम अकेले था ले अजी
Sorry, someone needs to mute. Jeff, who's on the call today, is driving a lot of that performance work that we're working on, and he's going to be driving that forward this week. We've already shipped a bunch of improvements for Android. Crash rate has gone down significantly, and we're going to be chugging through more of that stuff this week. But more of an FYI for everyone, we're focused on a lot of these like infrastructural improvements to the app to make it like work better for everyone. Cool. Last up is notifications. So Dan and Chris have been thinking a lot about this. I'll turn over to Dan to let him give the update on what we're doing with notifications.
Yeah, so I've shared a couple of different things on Farcaster and different casts, just talking about like people are feeling the effects of growth of the network, and quality is a focus, right? And so the kind of, you think about the areas of the app where quality, like specifically cast quality, manifests. You have home feed, which Varun and team have been driving, improvements to the algorithm there, and I think that actually feels pretty good for most people. Notifications feed, channels, and then basically if you click through to a cast and how the replies are ranked. So those are your four major surfaces. I think we've made a lot of progress on home. Channels, we've made some decent progress. I still think there's work to do there with both the trending algorithm and channel passes. But notifications actually hasn't been an area that we've invested in. And the only change we've made in the last few months is the grouping of notifications from people you don't follow. A bunch of people don't like that, but then any user that gets a lot of replies loves it because they don't then have some of the like kind of lower quality or spammy replies. So I think we're stepping back and kind of from first principles saying like, what do people care about from notifications? So to the degree that you have a point of view, I'll put a cast out later and people can contribute, but I've also spent a lot of time talking to people. I also get a lot of notifications myself, so I have a decent sense for this. But I think you can kind of think of like where we're going to head is give people the control of being able to actually drill down into the different categories of notifications and find individual notifications, but actually make the default notifications feed algorithmic and in a way that it is actually really high signal. And so it kind of, it takes some of the stuff that we've done with this reply grouping that is kind of worked for some people, kind of take that as a principle and overall make the home feed of notifications something that when you get a red dot on the notifications feed in Warpcast, you have trust that it's mostly going to be high signal, if not always. And then there are other kind of ways to drill into all of the separate. And then actually looking at like at scale platforms like Instagram or TikTok, one, they actually changed the notifications UI for people. So if you're just like a casual user of Instagram, you don't actually have the like influencer version of how notifications are. And at those scale, they basically approach it the same way. So that's kind of where we're headed. I'm sure there are going to be people who have feedback and kind of things, but at the same time, this is where you can go use Supercast or you can use Nook or any of these other clients that have popped up. Favor just launched today. So Warpcast is going to have an opinionated point of view that we think works for most people. And that should be rolling out over the next week or two.
Any questions on notifications? There's one on DCs, but I'll see if we want to chat about notifications before I jump back to that. Okay, question on official APIs to enable DC sending reading. So we spent a little time thinking about how we want to structure the roadmap for DCs, and this is how we're thinking about the next 1 year for DCs. So phase one is get DCs working well within Warpcast. There's just a bunch of structural changes we need to make. And if the stuff just doesn't work well in our app yet, it is definitely not going to work well if we open up APIs. If anything, it's going to get worse. So we just need to like settle the foundations, which we think will take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to get everything set up right. Phase two is going to be allowing people to read and write through APIs. So imagine you can build a bot that says, hey, if a user responds or interacts with me, I can then start having a conversation with them over direct messages and send them frames and other things. So you're not taking up public cast space. You're actually doing this sort of off net. In this phase, I mean, it's technically possible to do this today. You could reverse engineer our APIs and kind of go make this work. We don't encourage it because our client-side APIs change often, and so they'll break, and we want to give people a set of structured APIs that they can use to do this stuff. And this unlocks a bunch of interesting developer use cases, but it does not decentralize or make, DCs are still very much like a Warpcast specific. So that's phase two. Phase three, we want to make DCs available to other clients. And this will likely be a process where we work with teams and integrate and set up a way so that like Supercast or Nook and others can also get access to DCs and they'll work across systems. This will be a fairly complex project. I wouldn't be surprised if this takes 3 to 6 months to get right and get dialed in and get everything working. So by the end of the year, we might be in a place where we get there. And then end-to-end encryption and some of the more advanced features to actually bring privacy back to the network is likely a 2025 and beyond goal for now. So that's how we're thinking about it. I think what we have high conviction on is phase one, which is we are really, really focused on getting Warpcast stable. And the moment we hit stability on that, I think we will have a POV on how quickly we can have developer APIs for DCs and other things there.
I think one just thing to think about is the like quick version of getting like chat in an app, people can throw together. And then the reality is the user expectation on messaging is basically the highest. Like it is the most brutally competitive market in terms of clients. If you think about it, like you have WhatsApp, you have Messenger, you have iMessage, you have Signal, Telegram, and just if you just look at those apps and how polished they are and how fast and responsive they are at the scale that they are, that's what you're competing against. And I actually think that is so much harder to compete than even, frankly, something like Twitter or Instagram from the public feed side of things. So I think the focus for us is to actually prove to ourselves that we can even come close to that with the limited resources that we have in terms of just like our team. And if we can't get there, then doing any version where we're trying to actually get this across multiple clients and have it work in really easy way, as Varun points out, is just it'll sound good. So it'll be like, oh, good marketing, like, things are getting more decentralized, but the practical reality is users won't actually use it. And so I think if you've known anything about how we operate, it's like let's focus on the actual thing that matters here. And it's like we need to hit a performance level that people are actually not saying they're moving stuff to Telegram. And if we can do that, then we've earned the right to then actually go figure out how to decentralize it properly.
Cool. On that note, I think we're at the end of our agenda. One last call if folks have any questions or things that they want to talk about. Otherwise, we will wrap and see you all 2 weeks from now. Going once. Going twice. So there's a last question on how can one appeal like a spam flag? So let me actually take this one because I think this is an important issue for some other folks. We have a spam filtering system that's in place right now, which does 2 things. One is if you are consistently posting in channels or getting reported by content moderators or just generally like replying or engagement farming with people, you're likely going to get put into a spam bucket. What that means is, at least on Warpcast, your cast will still show up to your followers and everyone who wants to see your content, but they are not going to get recommended in channels. They're not going to get broadcast to other users, and they're not going to show up in any public space. So very clear delineation of like, you still get to talk to everyone who wants to talk to you, and there are 0 restrictions on that, but you don't get any boosts or any like jumps in the algorithm. Ideally, the system would be perfect and only like catch exactly the people that are being loud or very spammy on the network, but there are some false positives, and there's likely like 1 or 2 folks that got flagged that are kind of on the fence and maybe shouldn't have been flagged as spam. We're going to introduce like a vouching system in the next few weeks where if you have been incorrectly flagged, you'll be aware of it, and someone else will be able to vouch for you and say, no, this person's good, and we'll have some kind of system that actually like retrains and remodels all of these users over time. So expect that to like launch in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Once we have a design in place, we'll have like a clear timeline for that.
I think the one other thing just to point out, and we can do a better job of explaining this, is I think the model people need to understand is if you are casting in your own timeline, like, or your own feed, so you're going to your followers, you're basically not going to have this hit you. It's when you go to public spaces, and the 2 specific public spaces, channels, or replying to other people who don't necessarily follow you, that is going to potentially trigger spam flags for you, because basically what you are doing is you are taxing everyone else's attention. So if you think about like a big channel like memes or base, and you put a spammy cast in there and it has 100,000 people following it, just if you just like add up the total number of seconds that people have to actually like that's expensive to the network. And so channels are not public spaces. They are shared spaces that have hosts. And so I think that we can do a better job of educating people. We have channel norms. I think we're going to continue to iterate there. But I actually think the one thing, if to kind of push out is if you're casting in a channel, you need to respect the rules of that channel. And if you don't respect the rules of that channel, it's actually going to end up with you being marked as spam. And shadow ban is not the right term, because actually your followers continue to see your content. You just don't give visibility. You've lost the privilege of getting visibility to other people in shared spaces.
Cool. That brings us to time. I know there's a few questions we didn't get to, so we can either take them in the next developer call 2 weeks from now, or you can tag Dan or I on Farcaster, and we're happy to continue the conversation. Cool. Thanks everyone for coming today, and we will see you all 2 weeks from now.